Well, I'm just going to introduce our panel. So Dr. Andrea Brinnel, Early Childhood Consultant and Program Manager for 619 Part B, Preschool Special Education at the Connecticut State Department of Education. If you can just wave and say hi. Also, Lisa Eells, Principal of Wintonbury Early Childhood Magnet School in Bloomfield. Harriet Feldlaufer, Director of the Division of Early Childcare and Education at the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Dr. Karen List, Project Director for the PK3 Leadership Program at the UConn-NEAG School of Education. And Joe Macrino, Principal of Oswegatchie Elementary School at Waterford.
Good morning, everybody.
So welcome everyone, and we're glad that you're here. And to begin with, what do we mean? We'll start with, what do we mean when we say birth to grade 3 students? What are these students? What are their special characteristics of the early childhood students, and what makes their education so unique?
So I'll start. I don't think there's any right answer. I think that young children, the most important thing for them is relationships, and that's the core of everything. Relationships, student to student, relationships with adults. And from there, we can guide the children to learn almost anything, but given hands-on materials and things like that, and all the way to 3rd grade. So whether you're teaching reading, whether you're teaching math, those core academics, you need hands-on relationship-based education.
And I can add that we know that the developmental period of early childhood is incredibly important based on brain science and brain research, that children learn huge amounts from birth through age 8, and then we look at schools for preschool to grade 3, and that it really is an opportunity for schools to be able to expand kids' knowledge and have them learn and provide them with opportunities that are going to be the foundation for the rest of their life and the rest of their learning. And when we don't focus on these really early years, we have a very, very big missed opportunity.
And I'll add that I think what is unique about this developmental period, and it is, thanks for saying 0 to 8, because it is 8 years, is that learning is really about the whole child. And it also is about engaging families. So as kids get older, and they begin to have concepts of ability around, I'm good at math, I'm good at science, I'm good at writing, I'm good at sports. Young children think they're great at everything. And it's really adults that actually ruin it for them. Because remember, like when they're little, it's like, I'm the best jump roper, I'm the best artist, I'm the best mathematician, I'm gonna go to the moon. And then we begin to give them information about how effort matters and ability matters, and they start really saying, I'm good at certain things and not others. But when you're in birth to 8, you're great at everything, and everything you learn is all connected, whether it's physical, emotional, cognitive, the learning is all really intertwined.
I couldn't agree more. And I think when you talk about what makes early childhood programming unique, and I think what makes it quality is the focus on community and communication. And I think all grade levels could learn a lot by looking down and pulling up all those great things that we provide for our 0 through 8 students and building instructional programming about social interactions, problem solving, self-regulation. Those are the building blocks of all of our learning, even as adults. So we have a lot to learn from pre-K to 3.
I just wanted to add that I think it's critically important that learning be integrated across subjects rather than discrete, and also that we pay close attention to the interests of children.
Thank you. So Joe and Lisa, you were both on our panel today because you have model early childhood programs. So briefly tell us about your schools before COVID-19 and some of the challenges you and your teachers faced providing quality instruction to your youngest students while practicing physical and social distancing. What worked well? What would you change if you ever had to do it again? Hopefully you don't, but if you did, what might you change or do differently? And tell us about your school community and the crazy school year that's coming to an end.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, well, we're in the beginning stages. So this is, as a district, we're in our second or third year of even having preschool programs in 2 of our 3 elementary schools. So we are getting our feet wet and building, well, we were building that in-building programming that we thought was best for students. And now, and then this happens. But I was extremely proud of my team, because good teaching is still good teaching. And especially when it comes to early childhood, it's so focused on communication. I was very proud of my district's ability to roll out access to technology from day one. So immediately we were able to, we are not a one-to-one district yet, but the district was able to acquire enough devices for all of our students and distribute them to all families. So that was a hurdle we quickly jumped over. But then then how do we teach in this environment, especially with our youngest students who has never been exposed to this sort of technology before, while still being really intentional about messaging to parents. We cannot, and this has become my mantra, I'm sure my staff is going to get sick of me hearing this, but we cannot force the classroom into the living room. So how do we take into consideration the domestic needs of our families while still providing, that connection? And what it really comes down to is we're in an asynchronous model. That's what we rolled out. And the way we're going to get better is more and more of that synchronous contact. Yes, it's heavy lifting. It's scheduling with families and teachers families to make that work. But as soon as we rolled out the Zooms or the face-to-face, that's when we started to see that engagement build. That's when we really could start talking about how do we now instruct and maintain those communities of learners that are integral to quality to early childhood programming.
Yeah, so I know that Joe has the typical model for, public school with pre-K and grades higher, which is so lovely to have. I, did have that at various points in my career. But I do have a unique school with 18 pre-K classrooms and no other grade levels in the school. We have 18 kids in each class. We integrate special education. It's an inclusion model originally designed for Bloomfield children to not have the segregated classrooms or even the reverse integration. It was designed on a higher modeling of typical peers to special ed. We do have now our districts picked up on that. We're a great special ed location. And so our magnet school districts, we have 6 others, also send their kids with special needs, which has just really helped us to learn even more about the breadth of what we can provide in an environment like that and partnering with our towns. So the challenge is actually, I don't have 2 pre-K in my school, I have 18. So challenges have been getting everybody to row in the same direction. How do we have conversations with each other that reduce that variability from classroom to classroom and make sure that we're all providing high quality education and not necessarily competing with each other, right? So there's this collaborative competitiveness that's in the school, and the teaming is really strong. So I have to say that was a challenge, making sure that I could keep that. There were strong formats when I came, and 6 years later, they are even stronger. So when we were faced with leaving school, we had no, it was, you all were faced with that. All of a sudden they're telling you you're going to dismiss at 1 o'clock, at least in our district. I think it was Thursday afternoon, you're dismissing at 1 o'clock and we don't know when we're coming back. And meanwhile, you're going to be needing to get together at some point to, plan a comprehensive program. And so what we did, and professional development was the purpose of leaving at 1. And so our teams, we just broke up and they went to work, and we had a viable plan within 2.5 hours of one. We just designed it right from the beginning to model the school day, morning meetings and small group. What are we going to do with the cognitive skills? How are we going to make sure that there's SEL involved, and how do we keep our second step lessons going? And so so we had that for the 2 weeks where things were just sort of on pause with the whole state. And then when we had a week So there was 1 week of just complete pause, a week of absolute work, even though it was distant, to keep those teams going, to go by domain. And so again, the whole child that Harriet brought up, that we were doing physical domain, fine and gross motor, we were doing language, receptive and expressive, and we had the teams broken up looking at we use creative curriculum and teaching strategies gold. They took all the objectives and they made formats that would address those objectives. And with the teaming, our teachers also agreed that with the variety of abilities that everyone has in a classroom, and we wanted to make sure our special ed students were having their needs addressed, that we chose by domain. We went through objectives and the teams created home-based learning activities right from the get-go that the objectives could address. So we have a menu that teachers could choose 2 objectives per child to make sure they were moving across the curriculum. And that was something that our superintendent really wanted, was how do we know that they're using the curriculum and they're moving? So right from day 1, we chose Zoom as our platform. And I will admit there's a variety of how teachers have used it. As time has gone on, there are some teachers using it almost on a daily basis. They've broken up to maybe have 2 kids or individual meetings, but some teachers are doing, whole group 1 time a week. So I think that what we would get better is really learning from each other, again, keeping that teaming going to find out what really is working. And that face-to-face is absolutely what we need for the children if we do need to continue this. So, Joe, I'm glad you brought up the devices. We did a very similar thing. We definitely are not one-to-one, but our tech department and working with central office, we were delivering Chromebooks at home. Principals were doing that as well, some teachers. And I think that worked out great. So we had a core lesson plan that was designed by our instructional coach based on objectives. And then from there, teachers were able to modify for their own songs or whatever they had going. But for special ed reasons, we kept all of the standards exactly the same for that week across the 18 classrooms so that the special ed teachers could modify. So I don't want to take up more time, but I think that the relationship building is very tough on a screen. Our kids had a very hard time. Our kids with special needs are definitely way more should this model continue, because they really had a hard time engaging with the screen. We really need that personalization of the learning. So thank you for listening for so long. With 18 teachers, I have a lot of material that they've given me. So
and we know you do
lots of credit.
Lots of experiences.
I learned a ton. I would just preface all virtual learning and online distance learning or hybrid models are not our preference for young children. In fact, maybe PreK, but definitely not birth to 3, right? And I think what you're doing in learning is that there is not one strategy, but in fact, there are multiple strategies. And that you really have to make opportunities for those multiple strategies, not necessarily actual classrooms, right? About conferencing with families. It's about working with individual children. It's providing learning tools to families. So there's so many complexities doing this. And for young children, they should not be in front of a screen for more than 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I think Andrea just put up the webinar that OEC and SDE developed around distance learning, because this is not our preferred model. Everything we know about relationships and trust building and bonding is not about virtual communication. So as long as we can keep, really an open mind that hybrid learning and distance learning could just be conferencing with families. We're doing a lot of coaching of families at the OEC because a lot of our programs, really required, they were built on-site home visiting, nurturing families network. We have all these programs at OEC that you're in the home and all of a sudden you're not. So we had to do a lot of pivoting to really figure out how to support children and families from a distance. And it's not all about classroom meetings. And I'm glad to hear you say that you got to break it down, because kids should not be in front of the screen that long. And I think it also ties parents to being kind of policing, because in a lot of ways, it's not the 3-year-old that's going to turn on and get on the computer. So in a lot of ways, you mentioned, Lisa, there are family needs and demands that are really going to drive how you do distance and hybrid learning, because they're the ones that are with the child. So very, very complex. Great navigating.
A real positive we got from this that Lisa reminded me of is, and I'm not paid by Creative Curriculum, but we've really, I think, empowered our paraprofessionals and embraced this time to support their learning as adults. And the teaching strategies, I mean, that was basically our plan out of the gate. When they're not working with students, it's that professional development shot in the arm. And there was some really great resources online. So that would be part of their weekly assignments. Okay, review the curriculum, see how it matches up to what we're doing in class. But there was also some great webinars through that website. So we're just using this time to build their capacity for when we do get back into the classroom.
Can I ask a question of Joe and Lisa? And that is, how are you monitoring attendance, or engagement? Like, I'd like to learn from you what could happen going forward, because OEC never closed, right? But we are having to offer different kinds, because some people are not going to come back. There's not room for them. They're not working. They don't want to. What were some of the things that you did to sort of understand who was engaging, how they were engaging? Did you survey families? I'm just curious, because we're looking for that actually information.
So I'll give Joe a turn, I promise. But I think that this was the thing that I was so proud of being in Bloomfield over during this time, was right out of the gate. The superintendent made 2 requirements for teachers. There needs to be a lesson plan that everyone has access to, and there needs to be a communication log with families. Families need to be communicated with a minimum of once a week. So that direct I was going to save that for engagement, but you brought it up now, so it's good. Teachers needed to communicate with families, and initially it was, are you okay? Do you have food? Is your health okay? Is everyone in your family healthy? And those were that's where we started, was, you know, the Maslow before Bloom, right? And so really doing that check-in, and, you know, of course, some of the families with students with special needs who have difficulty regulating, now it's a big problem, right? So we're in the moment coaching, you know, what can we do to set up a schedule? We're sending, you know, visual supports, visual schedules, things we never thought. Yes, for some kids we would do that, but this was for many children. We had you know, our OT, our PT involved with how do you provide activities for kids, and those things went online about how can you regulate, how do you fit exercise in, what are some of the things you can do with kids in terms of a schedule. So it was really a lot of teaming, a lot of online quick uploading, it was a lot of quick problem solving. And I would say that the biggest strength of what has continued is that parent communication, because even now, you know, kids, not kids, but the parents have, you know, maybe fallen out of work. They don't have work now, where before they weren't food short. So we had to keep this ongoing, and what's happening with the child in front of the screen, and then coaching the individual parents about what they can just manage. If you can manage reading 10 minutes a day, let's build on that. Let's start there. So, the parent feedback was critical, and how we monitored was initially the district, of course, asked us periodically to what's the engagement, and we just had to do it again. Initially, I got into all the communication logs, and I looked for the quality, and I looked for the frequency and all of that, and the district had a rubric that we've been working on and kind of morphing to make it appropriate as well as developmentally appropriate, because of course we had Google Classroom is, of course, a different thing. You can see exactly what's happening on there. When did the kids log on? You know, who was in there? But for early childhood, it's all about the parent communication. And Seesaw was a great tool. I think that I would require all of my teachers to do it. I gave a lot of options because they're such high-level thinkers and wonderful educators, that I was giving a lot of options, but I think now Seesaw would not be an option, because Seesaw is a great app where even birth, you could be using this to have parents upload the response to their tasks, their learning tasks that were put out there and suggested, and then they can upload the evidence. And I think that having evidence of learning was critical. And again, some parents didn't have the time. They're essential workers, or, you know, they're home with 4 other kids that are, you know, various ages that have more learning to do. So we really just had to individualize and do that. So Bloomfield can be a resource of these engagement rubrics if you would want.
We're a pre-K through 5 school, and at the beginning of all this, we identified Seesaw as our platform for pre-K through 2, and Google Classroom is 3 through 5. So I'll speak just to, as Lisa said, Seesaw provides that kind of formative accountability, that portfolio of student work, so we could still make judgments on the quality of contributions and the quantity of contributions. We still have staff take attendance, though not through a punitive lens. It's only to be used as a tool, once again, as a barometer for engagement. So if we have a child that hasn't checked in for 3 days, that's the bat signal for me to pick up the phone and say, are you guys okay? You know, do you need assistance? And from the beginning, the staff and I had those open conversations very directly. These will not be punitive phone calls. There will be days where parents will not be able to contribute, and that is fine. They just need to know that we're part of a team. Excuse me. Where was I? So yeah, so it's that level of trust with families. We're not out to get you, but we are going to check in because we care about you. And I think I can say this at this point now. I think parents love it when the principal calls and says that's okay if you can't do anything today, because I think that'll get you more, because they'll be more willing to come back instead of me calling and saying, well, this Friday your 4-year-old has to make up all this work. That's going to burn out parents very quickly. So from the beginning, we realized this was a transaction. We had to be flexible, and there are things beyond our control. You take the building out of the equation and equity just falls flat. This is a great time to reflect on why public education is such a foundation of our country. And we have to balance that as educators. We are not going to get 100% participation all the time, but as long as we get a little something, a check-in, that they pick up the phone or the parent emails us saying we're okay, but we're tuning out today, and we just build from that.
Okay, I'm going to move us on. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that from the superintendent level, that has to have that permission, right? So I really think that our superintendent as well was like, this is not about, you know, making sure the kids get their work done. We need to meet parents where they are. So I'm sorry, I'll let you move on.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We could talk about all of this forever, but there's some really crucial kinds of things that I think that we really should talk about today. We know that there's a set of unique circumstances, issues, concerns that have arisen because of COVID-19. So let's talk about what administrators and school leaders need to be aware of, what leadership skills that you may need to deal with these issues, and the guidelines and recommendations, especially coming from the State Department of Education for early childhood programs. So first off, let's talk about the end of the school year. And I know before everyone else got in here and the panel was assembling, this was a big topic. So let's talk about the end of the school year. I'm sure there are parents and guardians concerned with the fact that the children missed about 1/3 of this year's educational experiences. What should administrators, teachers, and even parents be thinking about as we move these students forward a grade? Or do we hold them back because they didn't get a full year? What are your thoughts?
We have to be ready for the kids. The kids don't have to be ready for us. That's just my 2 cents. We have to adjust everything. When we get back into the classroom, it's going to be a completely different world for public education. We have to revise and rewind our curriculum, make sure those foundations are there. So we just have to assure parents who are worried, scared to death, and traumatized during this time that we are going to take care of their kids, and we will adjust accordingly.
And
I'm in complete, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Karen. You go first. I'll find the resource I was looking for while you talk.
Okay. I just, you know, I feel so strongly that we need to meet children where they are. We should not be holding them back. We need to accelerate learning for children and just move them forward. They're going to be fine. What also is going to be critically important during this time is to prioritize what we're teaching. We've got to weed the standards and really focus on what's most important.
I agree, Karen, totally. I also just want to remind everybody that pre-K is not just only in the public school, and we never closed pre-K in Connecticut. So I think the reality of returning is that you're going to have children who've had an even wider array of experiences that varied. So not everybody lost learning, but some did. This COVID situation actually exacerbated, I think Joe is referencing it, to the inequities in our society. And so we had a lot of children whose parents worked in the hospital, they're essential workers, frontline workers, and we popped up 29 sites adjacent to hospitals to take care of those children in licensed centers. And we paid care for frontline workers and essential workers. So thousands of kids still got childcare. Many, many more did not. We know centers closed. But I think what you're going to be faced with is that there was such a variation in what children experienced in April, May, June, and even this summer. And I just want to be sure that that everybody understands that the variation's huge. Pre-K is not just in the public school. We stayed open. OEC never closed. And we ramped up hundreds of millions of dollars to serve essential workers and frontline workers and hospital workers. And I think we're going to see that. I guess my point is the variation's already huge. I think we're going to even see a larger set of skills and abilities walk in your door because of this unevenness around the state. Sorry, Andrea.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to alert people. I just put a link in the chat room. It is the updated, you might have heard it referred to as the kindergarten brochure. We have what parents should know about kindergarten entry, enrollment, and attendance that will be helpful. You're welcome to use this material with your families. And with regard to special education, sometimes there is a bit of conflict there. And it's families who have children on IEPs who really very strongly feel that their child really needs another year of preschool for a lot of reasons, to catch up, because they missed some instruction. In general, we don't recommend that. It has to be a really unique set of circumstances that would allow that. And we were talking before everybody got on, and all of us, we probably have more than 100 years worth of early childhood experience between all of us. And we were talking about the 1 or 2 times in our careers that we actually saw a retention that we felt was the appropriate thing to do. But it's really important for you to know as a building principal or administrator that if a parent retains their child in preschool, they are in essence opting out of kindergarten, which is the required grade, and preschool is not. And the district is no longer obligated to provide special education services if a family opts out of kindergarten. Some districts do, but they are not obligated. And I think exactly what Joe and Harriet were saying, we do have an equity issue here, that schools need to be ready for the children. And Joe, I wrote down something you said earlier, we can't, and I can't find it now, but having that attitude that school is going to be ready for the children and it's not children ready for school is probably a really good headline to portray to families so they can be a little bit more comfortable. And another thing that you may want to point out to them, if they have a child with a significant disability, they are shaving a year off transition services. Hard to think about when you're thinking of your child being 5, thinking about them when they're 20. But they are, that's the reality. Eventually, they're going to be that 20-year-old, and parents may want those additional services.
So a question that just came in is, will OEC guidelines align with the State Department of Ed guidelines for reopening in the fall for those pre-K programs that are located in public schools?
Yes. So again, we never closed. So in a lot of ways, will SDE align with the OEC guidelines for reopening? No, I'm only kidding. Yes, we are. Beth and I both serve on the pre-K grade 12 reopen committee under Commissioner Cardona's authority. And we are working very closely. The first step we actually had to make was before September. We had to align our summer camp and summer school guidance, because we opened summer camps because the governor let us. And then Miguel and his team aligned summer school guidance to the summer camp guidance. And that's all on our website and on the SDE's website. And it's very, very, very comprehensive. OEC has put out guidance for childcare It's on our website in English and in Spanish. It's user-friendly. It has lots of visuals, and it addresses everything from hand washing to mask wearing to PPE to temperature checks. Going forward, we are seeing more and more childcare opening for July and August, except for those that are in the public school who are not able to. But we will definitely be working together as these are all of our children in all of our communities. So we're working hand in glove. Andrea and Michelle have done a lot of work around webinars, guidance for distance learning. We will continue to do that as we know it's a priority. So the answer to that is yes. And please check the OEC website under our COVID-19 page, because there's a lot of information about childcare and how to be safe and how to be safe during COVID. So yes, alignment is very much on our list.
So Harriet, one of the other questions that came out is how are you going to handle social distancing, disinfecting, that kind of thing? So you just talked about the guidelines for the summer daycare programs. I think it'd be interesting if you can just give us a few of the highlights, like are the kids wearing masks? Are they, you know, how are you keeping them separate? What are, you know, just some of the.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, I don't have it in front of me, but it is all there. We are not in normal times, and we know that it is very stressful. And we know that not everybody wants to send their kids to childcare. And we also know we have a lot of providers that don't want to return. We lost about 80% of our center-based childcare since COVID. We paid programs, but they closed. We lost about 40% of our family childcare. So we are serving many, many fewer children. We have seen an uptake in family childcare because it is a smaller environment. And I don't know what it'll look like in the fall for center-based. The temperature, the check for health, rather than use a lot of PPE, we actually have families do that, either in the car or just in the parking lot as they're dropping their children off. They do a temperature check, and we ask about if anybody is ill and how people are doing. Mask wearing is worn by all adults that are interacting, and it is strongly encouraged for children over the age of 2. Again, it's really hard to wear a mask and be with your friends at school. You know, we're not going to see the big sand table. We're not going to see the big water table. Those days are gone. We're going to limit who's on the playground. There'll be lots of cleaning between groups going in and out. We already have limited group size of no more than 10 in a classroom. And we just recently moved from 50 in a building to 50 from 30, because we were getting a lot of interest from more families wanting to return and more providers in some of the larger places able to open classrooms that are all very much distance. No more family meals, no more shared snacks. So all the things that we used to do to help teach children about social and emotional and how to live together in a community has really, really changed. But the guidance in our guide, it's very, very clear. It's gotten a lot of, I mean, SD loved it. They sent it out right away. Rhode Island has it, Massachusetts has it. I think it's a really clear document that helps people know it's okay to go back to school as long as you follow certain practices. And if you need to go back and you're ready, we're there ready for you.
Great. Thank you, Harriet. Andrea, I'm going to go to you because you sent out this morning or yesterday the fact that the transition to kindergarten guidance has come out to the superintendents. Can you talk a little bit about that and specifically what those guidelines are telling us from yesterday? You're muted. Andrea, can't hear you. Andrea.
I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
You would think after all the Zoom meetings I've been at, I'd be used to that. Anyhow, I just want to let everybody know that this is not just an SDE document. This was a document that jointly went out by both commissioners, by Dr. Cardona and Beth Bai, and it was jointly developed by both agencies and also with the assistance of the Birth to Grade 3 leaders group. And what we did was we really took our existing document, which is transitioning to kindergarten, the why, what, and how of this important milestone for Connecticut students. and use that as a framework for talking about the really unusual circumstances that we're in now. So what we go through in the document is we really detail what are the key components of successful transitions, including pre-transition activities. We talk about collaboration and then give some ideas of what the core activities will really need to be as far as communication and buy-in, those kinds of things. The importance of establishing a timeline. We used, again, the guiding principles from that transitioning document. And then what we did is we took the guiding principles and we broke them down into the potential models of return that we may have, whether it be a full return to school, continued distance learning, or a hybrid model, and gave recommendations for each of those priority areas. And I think we broke it down as best we could into a really logical format. And we wanted to make sure that districts understood that it needs to be planful, even though we're in a really weird space, and how important communication is going to be. And I know Harriet mentioned students are coming from all different kinds of programs, or they may have missed all different kinds of programs. And school districts really need to make sure that they're collaborating with their communities. And another thing to remember is that when we go back to school with the reduced class size, I'm hearing lots of questions about it, especially in the special ed area. What about LRE? What about least restrictive environment? Preschool isn't a required grade, so can we just bring back the students that are on IEPs with regard to transition? We will be coming out with some more specific guidance about that, but right now, just to be really transparent and let you know that the federal government hasn't waived any requirements of IDEA. So as you look at that general ed transition to kindergarten document, and I'm sure Rosie will share it with everybody if you haven't gotten a copy already.
Yeah, we're getting ready to put it out, so.
Keep in mind that although preschool is not a required grade, as you're thinking about the kids moving up to kindergarten, think about how you're maintaining that preschool for those kiddos that have not aged up to kindergarten.
Okay, so Andrea, can you also talk about special education, some of the guidelines with special education, and a little bit about Child Find and the mandate there, and all of those pieces with special ed, and how do we keep that going so that we don't lose any of our students?
Well, I guess the important thing to know, like I just said, is the federal government has, for good or for bad, has chosen not to waive any requirements of the IDEA. So we're still responsible as public schools for free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment for any identified child. So I will actually put the links when I'm done talking into the chat, but we have guidance about Child Find. We have guidance with regard to data collection. So some of you may know that we weren't able to waive the early childhood outcomes data collection, but we did find workarounds to do it as best that we can. And I guess in addition to that big idea of no requirements have been waived, we really want to let people, especially teachers, know we know they're working really hard. And we know sometimes these requirements are like, why would anybody be making me do that under these circumstances? We just want to let you know that we know teachers are working hard, and we just ask that they do the best that they can do with regard to some of these requirements. Others of them are just, they're non-negotiable with regard to FAPE 3 and data collection and those kinds of things. But we do have systems in place, and what I will do is, rather than babble on, I will add those guidance documents into the chat so you can look at them. My contact information is there, so once you get a chance to get your hands on them, feel free to be in touch, and I'd be glad to have a conversation with you, as a small group or as individuals.
Rosie, I just dropped in the OEC Childcare guidance to answer questions like how many aides, how many staff in a classroom of 10, physical distancing, all of those things.
Perfect, I saw that. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
so
the group size is for everybody, not just children. So if you're bringing in OT and PT and other supports, that's all part of the group size. You've got to plan accordingly.
Before we move on, Lisa and Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about how you were dealing with special ed, PPT meetings and that kind of thing while we were doing our physical social distancing?
Okay, I didn't know if Joe wants to go first, or you want me to go? Okay.
Go ahead, go right ahead.
Yeah, our director of special services is top notch, Wendy Shepherd Banish, and she has gotten the guidance out for us immediately as soon as she's received it, and stayed in conversations with us ever since we went out. And so we, you know, we're kind of just in a holding pattern, and then all of a sudden we were holding PPTs and transition meetings for birth at 3, and then also child find. I appreciated that in the guidance there's a little latitude in terms of video and being able to see kids on a screen. And so we've been now, in terms of child find, staying in touch with families, doing Zoom meetings, kind of just started with like kind of looking at it like an SRBI model of, which I know child find is, but you know, documenting now, even though they're not in school, you know, able to come to the school, or we can't go visit in the care centers or at home to see the children, we're now seeing them on a screen. Also, what we did was broke down the barriers for our ESY program. So we have distance learning. The superintendent made a decision that all distance learning would be happening for any summer program. And he made that decision a while ago. So we've designed that, but then now we're including any kids who might benefit, not just kids who have an IEP. And of course there isn't really an IEP, but they're going to register just for the experience. And then our teachers are going to be documenting, you know, skills through observation and things like that. So it's been an interesting, you know, we've had to blow up all of those barriers that we've had in terms of rules and make sure that we're still able to see children. And that's why I appreciated in the guidance, it specified that video would be okay to be sort of, you know, gleaning where kids are in terms of their skills. And so we're going to go from there. And, you know, of course, await guidance. But it's been interesting and really an amazing time to be solving these problems, and we can only do it together. So thank you.
Yeah, and I feel like a student again, you know, with all the documentation coming out. It's just, as an administrator, you just have to keep abreast and current of all the documentation coming out. We have a great relationship with our special services director, Kathy Vallone, and as soon as we got the go-ahead, the floodgates opened for PPTs, you know, prioritizing those transition meetings to make sure that we proceed to make sure the kids are in the right spot when we get back. But at the same time, in those meetings, really stressing to parents, once again, that mantra, we will be ready for them, and we're going to do what we can.
So I know this question's on everybody's mind. Many schools and districts are in the process right now making decisions about what school's going to look like in the fall. What are the guidelines for returning to school in the fall, if we have any yet, or where we are? So I'm checking with our State Department people, and what structures, policies, procedures do principals and teachers need to have in place to reopen their early childhood programs in the fall, and what should we all be thinking about when we're planning, and what do you think the new normal might look like next year?
Well, it's really difficult to answer that right now, Rosie, because what we have been told is within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have guidance from the State Department of Education about reopening school. I know that there is a statewide committee. Harriet and Beth are on that committee. I have worked on a CAPS subcommittee with regard to reopening, and I know there's very, very careful consideration to what's going to be the best for children and families as far as safety and as far as learning and having those meet in the middle. I know that there is a broad range of thought, anything from everybody just go back. We've been receiving emails from parents on both sides that everybody should just go back, and there's no way I'm sending my child back to school in the fall. So I would just say stay tuned. And I don't know, Harriet, if you have any additional information.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing the same thing. Staff are ready, staff are not ready. Children are ready, parents are not ready. I think from what I am reading and from the national webinars that I'm on and everything that I've been taking in is we will not have normal for a long time. Everything I'm reading is it'll be 3 months to 12 months before we actually know where we land. The landscape is changing daily and weekly, even across the country. Yesterday, we heard that the 12 states that opened up for Memorial Day weekend have had increased cases. and the prediction that there'll be another 100,000 deaths by September in the United States. So what we are doing at the OEC and working with SDE is looking at phases, because I think what we do for September may not be what we can do in November, December, or want to do. I think we're also going to see regional fluctuation. As much as everybody wants to do everything the same way, because that's the right and equitable thing to do, I don't know that that's how it's going to actually unfold. Because I think the governor is going to start hearing from people that say, why is my school closed? We have one case in the community, but we know in hot spots like the cities, it's going to be much worse by Thanksgiving. And so I don't know whether the SDE will be adjusting plans. I think they're going to have to, otherwise they're going to be open, shut, close, and I think it's going to be difficult. So the guidance is going to come, but on my call yesterday, it was very clear from the Commissioner of Education that he cannot say the guidance will never change.
Karen, so I haven't heard a lot from you today, but I'm curious as far as your PK3 Leadership Program and the training that you're doing at UConn, what kinds of things are you thinking that either teachers, educators need or school leaders need in order to be able to navigate in these uncertain times?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, we do run a program, and I'm happy to see some of our graduates and some of our current participants are on this call. We've paused the program for a year just because I think it's really important that the program be in person and not all in this fashion. And because we bring in experts from around the country. It's an executive style leadership program. We are able to do that. But I think the things that people have been talking about are right on. I especially enjoy hearing from Lisa and Joe about their leadership. I think the focus on flexibility with staffing, I think identifying the fact that we have new experts in our schools. When you talk about paraprofessionals and the role they're playing, they may be some of the tech experts that need to make this work happen. I think the other important thing is to really understand early learning. And when Andrea started in the beginning talking about the significant learning that goes on early on from birth to age 8, and especially in the early years up to age 5, it is astounding. And what my experience tells me, having been a superintendent of schools, is that a lot of the people that are in school leadership positions are not people that have background knowledge in early childhood. So I would say people should do whatever they can, and I'd be happy to provide a couple of books that we find incredibly valuable to our work. I'll put them in the chat because I think anyway, people can learn more about early development, executive function, purposeful play, a meaningful relationship with families, which I think has actually grown through this process. I really appreciate hearing the very forgiving, caring phone calls that are happening. But those I would say would be priorities in terms of leadership. And the other I would say is, as important as it is to be in touch with families, it's also very important to be in touch with teachers and staff individually and checking on them and being forgiving with them as well in terms of the struggles that they're dealing with at this time.
Great advice, Karen. Thank you. And we have a couple of questions in chat. One of them is, how does or will the limit of 50 children per program work in a public school setting?
I think that that's one of those things that we're going to have to wait until the CSDE guidelines do come out. But I think there may have to be some alternate kind of thinking. And I'm actually looking for, there was a webinar recorded on May 12th. Our colleagues from Rhode Island were actually on it. And it provided information about something called itinerant services in preschool special education. So should we get into a situation where we can't fit, you can't tell all the children, but children are in community-based programs, there may be thinking outside the box kind of opportunities to provide services. This is for preschool, to provide services where the children are as opposed to bringing them into the school. So I'm going to, once I find the webinar, I will post that into the chat as well.
I think some of the, well, number one, and it could change, right? It went from 30 to 50 last week. And I'm hearing little rumblings about class size going from 10 to 13 very soon. So it could change. Some of the discussions that we've had on the pre-K 12 reopen has been that if middle school and high schools stagger opening and stagger student attendance, and they might, because they'll have class size restrictions as well, there may be an opportunity to use spaces in some of those schools for young children. They may not be optimal, but if fewer K-12 students go back out, and they don't go back at once, there may be room in those LEA buildings for young children to be spread out. That is another part of the alignment I think that we're going to have to work on, but it's a really good question.
Harriet,
Oh, sorry.
I just have a quick question about like square footage though. So you can have 10 in a room, but what's the size room, right? And
Yeah.
And the latest thing I did read that they do need to be 6 feet apart. So I was just curious if that's addressed somewhere.
You can serve 10 children in a space that used to serve 20. That's the model. It's not taking 10 kids and then having the space. It's the number of children are reduced by half, but the environment, the physical environment remains open to the 20. And we'll be paying accordingly going forward so that you can accommodate fewer children and still get your state funding. We're working on that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Does that clarify it? Yeah, I thought I might have been confusing things.
Yeah,
for you guys.
no, I think so. I'm just worried, with our classrooms, they're pretty sizable, but even with 10 kids, can we do 6 feet distancing and all of that? So it's just confusing to wrap my head around. So thank you, Harriet.
Can I add to that? Because I've gotten a few phone calls over the past few days with regard to social distancing and our youngest learners. And at some schools, when they've read some of the summer school guidance, it looks like some people are trying to apply some of the strategies for older children to our youngest learners, where it says desks 6 feet apart facing forward. I don't know where anybody in the early childhood field would say, go out and find your littlest desks and put them in rows and have the kids sit 6 feet apart. So one of the recommendations that I've been giving as a suggestion is think about your center-based classrooms and think about how you can reorganize your centers for social distancing and your tables for social distancing. But it is a concern that I've gotten more than one phone call saying, where am I going to get all these little tiny desks from?
Great advice, Andrea. And I'm going to move us on because we're just about out of time, but I'd like to give each one of our panelists one last opportunity to share the one thing that school leaders need to keep in mind going forward, either during the summer or when we get ready to reopen school in the fall, that can make the transition for students and their families easier and more successful. So your final thoughts.
I'll conclude with a quote by one of my favorites, Leonard Cohen. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. This is our opportunity as advocates for early childhood to be a bit rebellious and find those opportunities to make that pendulum swing back into our court. This is when we can really champion and translate the importance of purposeful play, of restorative practices, and all those things that we know are best for children that are not necessarily as mainstream as other educational approaches right now. And we need those approaches more than anything. We know that because we see its effect in early childhood. And I think more districts are seeing the importance of these things as we go up through the grades. So I think the world needs early education philosophy more than ever. So it's time to stand up for what we believe and put it into practice and move it out of the conference room of, oh, imagine if we could do this. Well, I think now is our golden opportunity to spread those seeds that we know are right and change our scheduling of the day significantly, to move into an approach to curriculum that embeds the idea of community, of restorative practices and purposeful play. Those things, purposeful play gives us that platform to proceed in that manner. Early childhood education provides us that platform to build really strong, resilient citizens. And I think people will finally start to listen to us. I know my district has always embraced it. I see Melanie Smith-Severa, she's on right now, and she's given us a wealth of resources in building, and we're going to just run with that. So for you administrators that have always believed in this, now is your time to grab that sword and wield it for our kids. It's a hopeful time. As scary as it is, it's a hopeful time. We can change things now.
And just to piggyback on that, I think that taking what we've learned during this time is going to be critical for moving early childhood forward. So the teaming that has had to be so strong has to continue to move forward, and across levels. We've been doing a lot of vertical teaming on a daily basis, actually, with administrators in our district, and we are learning from each other about how those practices help the things like connecting with families, which maybe high school teachers haven't done as much. One of the things we've been saying is we're actually turning into birth to 3 because we're doing so much with our families, and that we've really changed our model to really include those families so much more, just like birth to 3 does. And going by the lead of the family, which again, our superintendent really wanted us to do, that we cannot, beat this into families. We have to meet them where they are, just like we always meet kids where they are and follow their lead. So I think those things are going to be so important moving forward.
Thanks, Lisa.
I want to just capitalize on one of the comments that Joe made, and Joe's always so good to be with you and see the results of your learning from our program. But the opportunity for change and for hope, and taking the best that we've learned from this experience and applying it to how we move forward. And I would also add that leaders need to be patient, they need to listen, and they need to act with integrity.
And I guess I would echo everything that Karen and Joe and Lisa said, and remind people. And I know Harriet was the person who hired me at SDE a very long time ago. And one of the first things she said to me when I walked into her office was, it's all about relationships. And it truly is about relationships and collaboration. And Karen, I couldn't agree with you more. The silver lining of all of this that's happened is really, there have been some good outcomes. The whole idea about coaching and relationships. I have heard such wonderful stories about children making great progress because coaching has worked so well from them. So taking what we've learned and then always looking for the silver lining and see what we can learn from it.
I totally agree with everybody that's spoken already to sort of capture this. For me, what it's taught me, and I think some of my colleagues in education and childcare, is that the nation has woken up to the need for high quality educational childcare services. We were really sort of stepchildren, to be honest, and we were a second thought. And every webinar I'm on, you saw, Congressman DeLauro's bill. It has become clear to this country that we cannot have families who can sustain themselves without having educators and providers with their children. So I think it could be a new day for how our society views the learning of young children and why it's so crucial.
Like I said, I'm always so thrilled to be with you people. A great panel of experts, and I'm going to ask you to put your contact information into chat, so if anyone has follow-up questions, they know how to get hold of all of you. But you are all such great experts and so caring and so nurturing for our youngest population, and it's so important because they are going to be our tomorrow. So thank you so much for being here today with us and being willing to talk about things that are really important. And it'll be interesting to see in a couple of weeks what else comes out from the State Department as far as guidelines go. But we may be back together again talking, but it's been great having you here today.